We thought about this situation for some time and then reached the obvious solution. Of course, what we were running into was the oldest law in the history of human knowledge. It always takes one generation for a new idea to become accepted. The imprinted symbol systems of the older generation cannot tolerate and indeed shriek with neurological pain at any idea or method which promises to change the game. Since we had no desire to cause pain, we redirected our communications and deliberately chose to beam our message to the younger generation. In the imprinted symbol system of mother and anyone over the age of 40, the word drug means two things: drug, doctor, disease, or drug, dope fiend, crime. No amount of reason, logic, or experimental evidence is going to change this deeply conditioned reflex. On the other hand, to people under the age of 25, the word drug means a wide variety of possibilities. Drug can mean fun, energy to study for a test, ecstasy, enjoyment of music, enhancement of the senses, religious revelation, expansion of consciousness, acceleration of learning. For the last few months, I have been lecturing to audiences about the psychochemical revolution. I pointed out that almost every neurological laboratory in the country is working with some chemical which can accelerate learning, expand consciousness, enhance memory, increase creativity. I tell these audiences that in the future the question will be asked not what book do you read, but which molecules are you using in your learning process. As I make these predictions, I watch the face of the audience, and I see the men over 40 frown in amazement and irritation. Is this fool suggesting that our college students become dope addicts? And I watch the faces of the young people saying, sure, where can we get it? When do we start? Any pioneer in the field of knowledge must, if he's going to retain his sanity and good humor, remember the lesson of history. It takes one generation for a new breakthrough to become absorbed and used. The young graduate students and psychiatric residents who were working on our project 6 years ago have now moved up to positions of responsibility in the universities and clinics. The undergraduates are now just about ready to take over, and the high school students of 6 years ago are now graduate students. The next 6 years will be a period of dramatic change in regard to the social acceptance of such psychedelic drugs as marijuana and LSD. By 1970, we'll have our first LSD congressman and our first marijuana smoking judges. you can see this slowly evolving change taking place right now. The New York Times, which used to be considered a liberal magazine, is written by lovely, dignified gentlemen in their 50s who are horrified and confused by the psychedelic revolution. The New York Daily News, which is considered a highly conservative right-wing newspaper, takes a breezy, open, and amused posture towards LSD and marijuana. Why? Because the average news reporter is in his 30s. Over 1/3 of the researchers and editorial assistants on Life magazine have smoked marijuana or used LSD, and by 1970 this figure will have doubled. But now that the psychedelic battle has been won, where do we go next? What should be the goals and strategies of the psychedelic generation? I have 3 things to say to young people who are growing up in a psychedelic world. Turn on, tune in, and drop out. First, let me tell you about turning on. There are as many levels of consciousness as there are anatomical structures in your body for receiving and decoding energy. The 5 most important levels of sleep: symbol, sense, cellular awareness, and molecular consciousness. Each of these levels of consciousness is based on anatomical structures in your body, and each level is attained through chemical means. In the future, the educated man will be the one who can move his consciousness deliberately, planfully, and precisely from one level to another for specific and harmonious purposes. The religion of the future will be based, as were the religions of the past, upon the human body and the myriad wonders within this temple. Any external event which distracts you from learning how to understand and use the machinery of consciousness within your body is irreverent and irrelevant. Within the temple of your body there are hundreds of shrines, each of which can produce a revelatory and ecstatic experience which is unique and meaningful in its own right. Psychochemicals are the instruments of the new knowledge and the sacraments of the new religion. But do not be deceived. The yoga of drugs is the most complicated, difficult, and demanding discipline of them all. Our present adult culture is based on 2 levels of consciousness and uses drugs promiscuously and lavishly to produce these 2 levels of consciousness: sleep and symbolic game-playing awareness. The average American knows how to put himself in a state of somnambulance and stupor by using our most popular drugs, barbiturates, tranquilizers, and alcohol, all of which are addictive, narcotic, and toxic substances. They dope you, and they can kill you. The average American is heavily addicted to the symbolic level of consciousness, hooked to external, tribal patterns, which he calls normal reality. The average American uses drugs to put his consciousness in a state of symbolic game playing. The first thing he does in the morning is take coffee or caffeine. The American who's involved in hectic, demanding game-playing sequences takes an energizer. At 5 o'clock, with symbols and symbolic sequences whizzing around in his head, the average American rushes home and puts himself in a mild state of stupor with alcohol. Drugs which stupefy and drugs which energize are simple, coarse, and vulgar procedures. They require no sensitivity, training, or skill. Chemicals which open up the mind, accelerate mental activity, and deepen consciousness demand lengthy training and disciplined, systematic study. Marijuana, for example, is a chemical which enhances the sensory level of consciousness. Marijuana is used to tune out the symbolic game and to turn on the senses. The retina of the eye quivers as light hurtles into it at the speed of 186,000 miles a second. The delicate membrane of the ear trembles to the dance of sound waves. This is why marijuana adepts turn on before they go to a museum or to a flower garden, or why musicians have for many years used cannabis as an enhancer of their auditory sensibility and their musical creativity. It is also well known that marijuana enlivens the senses of taste and touch and smell. Just mention food to the novice smoking marijuana, and he suddenly discovers he's ravenously hungry and that food has never tasted quite so good before. Of course not, because eating to the symbol addict is like fueling a car, but to the person turned on with marijuana, each grain of food sets off grenade explosions of sensation in the taste buds of the tongue. The aspect of marijuana which is most frightening to a prudish, puritanical culture or to an impotent generation is the enhancement of the tactile sense. Marijuana is a powerful intensifier of the sexual experience. This does not mean that marijuana leads to sexual activity. I would estimate that there is less sexual activity during marijuana sessions than in drinking bouts. But the sexual moments are exponentially expanded in the direction of heightened receptivity. Alcohol, of course, is the drug which leads to sexual excesses. It is well known that alcohol is the easiest instrument for seducing a woman. You load her up and roll her over. But the problem with alcohol as a sexual instrument is that the morning after, neither you nor she remembers much about what happened the night before. And that may be merciful, because what you would remember is a crude, brutal, fumbling sexual encounter which is best forgotten. By contrast, the sexual union under marijuana is a slow, rhythmic, mythic, highly ceremonial, unfolding, and unifying. I would say that very few of the millions of Americans who smoke marijuana know how to use this delicate and subtle instrument. Most marijuana is smoked in highly stylized cult situations which fail to take into account the sensory and intimate nature of the experience. I predict that in the next 10 years we will see dozens of manuals outlining methods for harmonizing the intersection of external energy and sense organ by the use of marijuana. But the training and sensitivity required for the use of marijuana is nothing compared to the knowledge and preparation required for the harmonious use of the stronger psychedelic drugs, such as LSD. Of all the methods of consciousness expansion, education, and spiritual growth developed by man in the last 4,000 years, the most demanding, the most challenging is LSD. LSD and similar drugs are direct chemical keys to the ancient texts of cellular wisdom. They put one in direct contact with RNA and possibly DNA species wisdoms which have been stored up for some 2 billion years. I have taken LSD 311 times. Each time I have found the experience awesome and awful. And what I have learned from these many voyages is the humiliating lesson that there is more to learn within my own body than I could grasp in 1,000 lifetimes. Each second of an LSD experience renders one a baby crawling on hands and knees in 1,000 Smithsonian institutes and libraries of Congress, all built into each cell of your body. Lesson number 1 then is turn on until you have made contact with the wisdom within the temple of your body. All your external activities are those of a robot performing stylized but automatic motions. Lesson number 2 is tune in. Begin to harness the energies which you are releasing into a harmonious exchange with the external environment. Take LSD and then look at your house. You will see, as someone from another planet would see, that you are living in the home of an insane robot. Slowly and planfully, you begin to change your house so that it becomes an external representation of the beauties you are discovering within yourself. As you continue to listen to the wisdom of your cells and to the direct energy explosions on your nerve endings, you will find yourself systematically altering where you live, with whom you spend your time, and what you allow to contact your nerve endings. You will find yourself moving out of stereotyped routines, moving out of cities, moving away from repetitious, tribally imposed sequences. You will find yourself slowly dropping out. As you tune in through turning on, you will realize that you belong to a new and mutational species, that you are sharing this planet with a highly energetic, rather destructive, and tragically robot species, namely the older generation. Every baby that is born is a mutant. Every baby is the genetic code's newest and most creative answer to the problem of adapting to the other forms of life and energy on this planet. The generation of adults, human society, attempts systematically to block this mutant promise. Your job is to drop out, to planfully, lovingly, gracefully detach yourself from the insane rituals and social pressures which surround you. You cannot drop out externally until you have detached yourself internally. You must leave your job, you must leave your school, you must leave the city, you must leave all of your social connections which do not make sense to your sense organs and your cells. You cannot do this alone in acts of isolated rebellion. Detaching yourself from the insanity of society requires group action. Your cells will tell you that you are a primate, a tribal animal, one who moves in groups or packs. No man can escape the prison of robot society by himself. Once you have tuned in by turning on, you will see that it is easy to leave the game. You have been born into an insane asylum, and it is simple and obvious to take advantage of the insanity around you to make your escape. One of the most obvious symptoms of the current social insanity is man's lemming-like rush to the cities. Take advantage of this insanity. You will find within 3 hours' drive from any American city deserted towns, deserted farmhouses, vast regions of forest and meadow and farmland which can be rented or bought. As the insane society of adults around you rushes to enslave itself to machines, you will find an increasing market for craftsman-like work or for the production of articles which are too beautiful or too private to be made on mass assembly lines, but not in rebellion. Drop out by tuning in. As you drop out, you will find that you do nothing which is not an act of beauty. And this is how you will make your living. Because nothing made by a machine can please a sense organ of a human being, or can make sense to the cellular wisdom inside a human being. Every time in the last few weeks that I have repeated this message, turn on, tune in, and drop out, I have been besieged by entreaties from my middle-aged friends. You can't say that, they tell me. But what I am saying is not reckless advice. It happens to be the oldest message of human wisdom. Look within, find your own divinity, detach yourself from social and material struggles. What is reckless is the American education system today, which puts young people on a mass assembly line geared to produce robots. American education does neurological damage. The schools and colleges of this country are designed and supported by parents who wish their children to become like them, which means like grandmother. One final word to the young people who listen to this record. Be cool. Remember, overt rebellion is part of the game. Be cool. Evolution is a silent, invisible process. When the first young amphibians began to slither out of the water, they didn't print manifestos or join picket lines. They did it in small, private, loving groups. The wisdom of yourselves will tell you that the work of evolution does not involve political action. Remember, too, to be kind. Do not frighten your parents unnecessarily. Turn on your parents. I don't mean drop LSD sugar cubes in their coffee cups. Start turning them on at the first level of the psychedelic hierarchy. Turn them on sensually. You see your mother as a symbolic creature, but she's actually a bundle of millions and millions of sense organs, of sensory cells. However symbol-addicted mother may be, she's basically a living organism with billions of neural cameras tuned to external energy. Don't use symbols to frighten her. Don't upset her symbol system. Go to visit her and delight her sense of smell with a flower. Delight her sense of taste with a new food. Delight her sense of sound with the rhythm and harmony of your voice. Turn her on without drugs. Be cool. Be kind. Turn on. Tune in. Drop out.